grace and peace of God be with you now and forever. Amen. This past week, I gave a ride to one of our members over to her bank. She had some business she needed to take care of. And when we returned, I went in with her and had a nice visit. She's wonderful to be around. I've always felt when I've left there a special blessing for being with her in her presence. As we were talking, there was a little break in our conversation, and she looked at me and she said, "It's tough getting old. It's the pits." And I said, "Well, I'm sure it can be difficult at times. I can understand that." And then she said, "You're born, you live, you die. That's it." Well, there was another little pause, and she added, and I think this was the reason for the feeling, the attitude she had at that point. She said that she missed her late husband being with her. Well, being a pastor, and I think like a lot of us, we like to make people feel better. And I said, "But you have so many wonderful memories of the years that you shared with each other." And she said, "I do. But it's not like having him here with me." Well, I left there and I thought to myself, life isn't easy. In fact, if I were to have enough time to sit down with each one of you, I think you could tell me about your own situation, or certainly situations that you've known about other people, that would be able to say indeed that life is not easy. But driving back over to the church, I put that aside and I began to think about today. I had so many avenues in which I was trying to approach the message that I wanted to share with you this morning, and I hadn't settled on anything. And then a light bulb went on. I had just left someone that was having a rough time. And I thought, isn't that what is shown to us in the gospel this morning that Chuck read for us a few moments ago? Two people, a woman and a man, a ruler of the synagogue, having an extremely tough time. One of them for many, many years, and the other for just a matter of a short period. The member that I was visiting with was going through a tough time. She had a particular attitude about her situation, about getting old and what it was and what it was doing to her, and about her missing her husband. And the woman in our gospel, and also the man, had an attitude about their particular situation and what it was that was a part of their confrontation for their well-being. Her, a lingering illness for 12 years, and he, a daughter who was very near death. Well, it seems to me that one's attitude, that is, one's way of thinking or feeling about something or about someone, can affect one's being and can affect a person's behavior, as it did in our gospel today. In the case of the woman and the ruler, it was their attitude about what was taking place that determined the action that each one of them was willing at that moment to dare to take in light of being in the presence of Jesus. It was many, many years ago, in fact, I can't even recall how many years ago, that I walked into a chaplain's office in a hospital. The chaplain happened to be a member of our congregation, and his receptionist had on her desk a sign that said, "It's all about attitude." Well, one day when she wasn't there, I looked at that again, and I thought, well, I'm going to do something. And so I wrote on a paper and I put it over that sign, and I said, "It's all about altitude." Well, being a chaplain's office, they kind of knew what we were talking about. We kidded back and forth. And then sometime later, I saw an added sign on her desk, and it said, "It's about attitude and about altitude." And that's what our gospel is about today. It's about the attitude of two people, and it's about their altitude of looking up that would finally become the source of their strength and their being. Think of those times when you may have despaired A time when perhaps you wish that you could turn to someone, to have someone just step in for you, if only for the moment. Those times when you didn't know where to turn, or maybe even at the point of just throwing up your hands and saying, there's nothing that can be done anymore. You felt like there was no longer any place, anywhere, or anyone to turn to. And if it really goes on, then you just might not care anymore. You might not care who knows or what they think. You see, there's all sorts of degrees of need that each one of us have gone through and probably will continue to go through at some time in our life. And not every single one of them is a point or a need of desperation. But in the case of the woman and the ruler, they were at the very end of their rope. So the question is, when that happens, where and to who do you turn? Well, I have to be honest with you and say that most of the time when I faced a situation that was really tough, I wanted to get it fixed and figured out myself. If it didn't kind of work, I might trust a person or two to share it with, but usually I minimized what was actually going on inside of me or taking place. And of course I prayed. But somehow or other in the back of my mind, I kept thinking, but you got to fix it. You got to make it right. And then if it got bad enough, I finally really let go. And as they say in Alcoholics Anonymous, you let go and you let God. And all the times in my life when there have been those particular moments and everything has always in the end turned out all right, how much better would it have been to begin with God instead of self, with self-sufficiency, independence, ego, pride. There's no doubt in my mind about these two today. There's no doubt in my mind that Jairus, when his daughter first became ill, probably felt he and his wife could certainly take care of it, could manage things, and it didn't work. They go to the doctor and they heard words, these dreaded words that would just ravish any parent, and that is about their 12-year-old daughter. There is no hope. He wasn't a fan of Jesus. He was a ruler in a synagogue. And at this particular point in the history of the relationship of those in the synagogue to Jesus was one that they looked at this man as one possessed by a demon, not a man of God, but a man of Satan, an impostor, a false prophet. And yet when it came to his own power, his own status, his own importance in the field of religion, all of that fell to the side when it came to his daughter and her life and what could be done about it. He had, like everyone at that particular time, heard of this Jesus, heard stories about healing ministries, the miracles, all the things that didn't mesh with his practices of faith and belief. And yet he was willing to throw all of that aside, to face the ridicule, the shame, and the banishment that would come from his partners in the synagogue, that would await him, willing to throw away all and to turn what was left as the only hope for her life. And that is that this Jesus could really be who others claimed him to be. And when he approached Jesus, he fell down on his knees and he begged Jesus to come to her. And Jesus did. Well, he almost did, but you have seen it portrayed by Karen and the gospel read by Chuck. He was interrupted on his way to the daughter, interrupted by a woman who had a flow of blood for 12 years. Obviously, one would say, when it first started, she could take care of it herself, and then she went from doctor to doctor, and we are told that nothing was there to help her medically, and then her money was spent. And we know, as the gospel says, that she had heard of Jesus, about his healing, and she believed that it was her only and last hope. But there was a problem. She was unclean. She couldn't even come close to a man, much less touch the garment of a man. But she thought to herself, if I can just get close enough and just touch it, I can be healed. She believed that. And she touched, and she was healed. And Jesus, sensing a draining power of God's healing grace working through him to this woman, stopped and turned and said, "Who touched me?" And she, breaking the rule of an unclean woman, had to be terrified. She had only hoped to touch and get out of there and not be seen. But she came back, and we are told that she fell down on her knees and she told the whole truth, all laid out. Now, Jesus could have read her the riot act. He would have a right to do that according to the way things were in that day and age. Instead, he said to her, "Daughter, your faith has made you well." No longer some obscure woman who came out of the blue, but he called and named her daughter. And he told her, "Your faith has made you well." And he bid her to go in peace. His journey had been interrupted by this woman. And then came the announcement to Jairus from some of his family, some of his friends, that his daughter had in fact died. And so the people begged him, "No use going there, leave Jesus alone. Your daughter's dead." But Jesus took him. Not as a ruler anymore, but as a father of a child. And he took him along with his wife and Peter, James, and John, and they went into the home. And with the spoken word, he had the child get up and to walk away from the bed. We are told that the people laughed when he approached that home. They laughed because he said, "She's not dead, she's just asleep." But those who were inside with Jesus knew that it was much more than that. They knew what he had done, and they were amazed, and we were told that they believed, and they left that home, and they were admonished to tell no one. Where are we to turn in time of need? Hopefully we have learned today from these two people with unrelenting attitudes that brought them to Jesus, rid of self, rid of pride, looking up and to the true source of healing and life, God pouring down his grace through Jesus, the hope of life for them, the hope of life here, the hope of life forever. From where does my help come in the time of need? We learn from these two people. And we learn from the psalmist who asked the question, "From where does my help come?" And then he says, "I lift my eyes to the hills." I lift my eyes. From where does my help come? My help comes from the Lord, who is the maker of heaven and earth. Where does our help come from? The Lord, who is the maker of heaven and earth. The member that I told you about at the beginning of this sermon, that felt life was the pits, that all she had left was the memories of her husband, and that wasn't much compared to him being there. Before I left her that day, she looked up and she said, "Someday we'll all be together again." Attitude and altitude, gifts of God, they go together. Amen.